Welcome to Relove Guitars. I'm Sam, and this is Stuart's Yamaha Revstar. Dun, dun, dun. Nice looking thing. It's covered in a little bit of dust here because I've already been sort of part setting it up. Well, I'm just getting ahead of the game because I'm feeling a bit shaky tonight. I haven't eaten, and I've got the calorie shakes, lack of calorie shakes, so I'm not in the best at presenting mood, but I've thought I'd better get on with it because he needs it for tomorrow for his band practice, which could be my band practice next time. So I'm not making tomorrow's practice, but I will go along and see if I can add something to the mix. Now, I'm just looking at this Yamaha, and I've set up one of these before, and it was a more expensive model. I've forgotten what, the Pro model maybe, and it had a lot of brushed aluminium type of, or brushed steel stuff, but this is more chromy, and but I have to say it's still a beautifully made looking thing. Now, as I say, a little bit dusty because I'm been handling it for the last while, but don't worry about the dust, we'll clean that off. So we've got a beautiful we've got a satin finish on the back here. We've got a volute as well, a dusty satin finish, a really nice neck joint, some very nice looking, unusual, I'm not sure what that's for, but it's got a knurled thing there. I'm not even, well, I'm going to say I'm not going to go under there, but shall we just for the shudder of it, right? Let's look under there, because I've already looked at some online, and this is a bit scary because I don't know what's going on, and actually not a lot of people do know. So you've got two P90s and you've got a 5-position switch, right? Yes, exactly, 2 pickups with a 5-position switch. What's going on? Well, I don't exactly know, and to be honest, sorry about my hand being in the way, not a lot of people online so far have given me a clear explanation, but there is a special piece of kit in here, and there's all kinds of different explanations of how it works as well. So I'm not going to even pretend that I know at this point in the game, but oh my lordy, have you ever seen any contents like that? This is one of the cases or the situations where I'm going to say it just works really well, and I'm not going to ask any more questions than that for now. So we've got this thing here, yeah, transformery looking thing, whatever that is. Wow. You've got a push-pull switch there. You've got small pot over there, and you've got a super switch with a couple of capacitors hooked onto there. So we've got the tone capacitor in there, but we've got capacitors on here. So there's some sort of other tone options going on with different capacitance. But what a cool looking innards is that? Well, it works. Whatever it is, I am not going to question it or second guess it. I'll probably learn more over time, but it does work, and it makes I think some great tones on this guitar. I particularly immediately like the neck tone and the bridge, the neck and the middle, the top 3 tones, sort of neck, middle, neck, both on, more than I like the bridge, but that's just me. Now, what I didn't notice is whether there's any, I didn't even see if there were any claims for what kind of P90s these were, so I don't think they're stacked in any way. There's a push-pull, and that does something, and it kind of boosts and cuts and something, but I don't even know. I mean, I think it engages that transistor, that big thing there with all the wires in it. You know what I mean. Anyway, so it's mysterious, and I quite like that. I don't understand what's going on. I'm sure some of you may be able to describe it, but the point being is you've got 5 positions for a 2 pickup thing, which is itself weird, and then you've got a push-pull, very clunky but very effective push-pull. You've got a decent quality bridge. You've got quite a fancy tailpiece, which I presume you just hook the strings under without having to remove it and do anything. And I've played this guitar, test played it, and so Stuart brought it to me at a very low action. Actually, it was about 1.1 on the bass side and about 1.1 on the treble side, which is too low, really, just slightly too low. However, it feels great at that sort of action, and the problem was there's repeating notes, unfortunately. So if we were to sort of play a few notes on here, this is I've raised it very slightly from there now to a more familiar 1.5, 1.2, but okay. So at 1.5 and 1.2 it just about plays. At 1.1 it was choked out all over the place. So we've got a bit more playability going on there. So we're going to need, if we're going to run at a nice low action, like about 1.5 on the high, low E, 1.2 on the high E, we've got to be a bit more, but we've got to do some leveling. So I'm just going to balance up this pickup very slightly. Gosh, my hands are a little bit shaky. I need donuts or something. Well, I clearly don't, but something about me says I need donuts. Anyway, so I think what I need to do straight away, well, you may have noticed that I've put the, I've cut the tusk adjustable nut down to size, and it's just about fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my electronic winder thing, and I'm going to take off this, well, slack the strings off, and then we'll mark up the fretboard and basically get level, get ready to rumble, get ready to do fret leveling. Now I think this will come out being a beautifully low, fast player, because it had very little in the way of, there goes the top of the adjustable nut. What was I going to say? Yes, it's got very little neck relief dialed in. So what I'll do is I'll just Easy Rider. I think these are stainless steel frets by the looks of it. Now they have been levelled. There's some levelling down the edges, right down here. That's pretty heavily levelled on the edge. So they have been levelled, but again, I expect, like lots of things, that this has been levelled without. Oh, I'm pretty certain without the strings on, and then there is a little bit of difference. Now, anyway, you know, to be fair on all manufacturers, they level for, if they level at all, they will level with probably a radius block type technique for a reasonably low action. They won't be leveling for the kind of action that my customers ask for, because it would take some more time and some more care, which is understandable. You know, some people, I think I'm, you know, moaning at the manufacturers. I'm not really. There are some that you can moan at where, you know, for example, the guitars have just ridiculously high first fret actions, which guarantee that the guitar plays out of tune when you play it down here. But so those kinds of things aren't really acceptable. But sometimes, you know, the way this guitar comes, you know, if we put it back up to maybe a 2mm and a 1.5, you know, you'd say it plays perfectly. You wouldn't say there are any fret problems, because they're effectively underneath the level of the action that we're playing it at, so not a problem. Come on. So I'm just going to give it a little pull, make sure that's seated. I'll tidy it up before we glue it in place. So yeah, I mean, you know, I'm always going for a high action, low action. So, you know, generally speaking, you know, there is some unevenness in all guitar frets, or all necks, or the frets on all necks, and you know, it's what am I looking for? What am I doing? Oh yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, it's just you're constrained to a more or less high, medium to high-ish action sometimes. But of course, when people want it lower and lighter, you know, that's where I come in and take it to that next little lower level. So these are currently sacrificial strings. And again, whoops, come off the notch. So these will go in the bin at the end, and we've got some 10s to replace it with. Okay, that's not perfect, but it's good enough for keeping it under tension for what we're doing. Okay, so now I'm going to get me the banana tool, which somebody did ask me about the other day, and I felt obliged to explain why it was that I was using this tool and not another one that has a similar rhyming name made by an inventor somewhere else. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that again, but I made my own. That's all I really end up saying about it. So I'm going to calibrate this rod here, and I did a bass guitar the other day. I didn't do it on video, but I still wasn't feeling so great. But I did it with the longer of the banana tools. So actually, it was the first time I'd used that one. I'd used the longer regular one before, but I had got myself the U channel one since then, a longer U channel one. So I thought, great, get to use that. So I'm going to now. Oh, I did check this when I was playing it, but let's just double check this for reality's sake. Yeah, it's a very flat neck, so I'm going to accept that's fine. Don't need any more than that. We'll consider if it needs more, if we have any struggle to make it play well, properly. Right, so now I'm going to gently level the E track, as I call it, knowing that the far end has already been, wow, that's been heavily hit. It's been so hard hit that it's lower than everything else right now, which is quite something. So this, for me, it tends to be a sort of snapshot of what's happening with the neck, and I'll pick out any kind of problem areas in this first leveling. Now, what's quite good, well, first of all, that's interesting. There is, for starters, there's a light. So for starters, so just right now, almost everything's cutting the material, but we've got something that I could see visually had been over filed here. So there's literally that end of the fret, which is just about okay because it's not on the playing area, but that's actually being filed down unusually low for some reason. But it's cutting, 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 cutting. Not much. Cutting, 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 cutting. Hardly any. Cutting, 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 cutting. And some 4 low ones at the end. So that's not too bad. So at the first play, what we're looking for is to make sure all the notes on the E track just play. Which they do, so I'm happy with that. So I'm going to move now to the B track, and again sort of partly in diagnostic mode. And when I mean diagnostic, I'm letting the way the banana cuts the tops of the frets, that's sort of telling me what the state of the frets are. Now, I forgot to demonstrate, one of the things that we had at the low action was getting complete choke outs on the bends. So now we've got a definite low fret, and this is where we had problems. I don't know if you remember, there's a lot of buzz on 12 and 13, and that's because 12 is low. It's not even being touched at the moment. So we've got a low fret problem at 11 and 12, actually, I would say. So that's something to look out for, and we've got low ones at the last 4 again, which maybe somebody's put a fall away in there in the factory, I don't know. But so there we have the 12th. That's the real problem. You see that? The 12th bends and chokes out. And that's because it itself is a low fret. So it's kind of forcing everything else. Well, you're bending from in a ditch. That's the way I kind of describe it. Which means that it's starting lower, and so it's making the next one effectively higher, which is why it's choking out on those bends. So in order to get those bends at this action, we have to continue and try and sort out or even out this 12th fret low spot. And the truth is, the only way to alleviate a low spot at the 12th fret is to carefully take down the frets around it. So you're kind of bottoming out this low fret. Now that you might say, well, that's not great. Well, it's not fantastic, but that is the consequence of uneven frets, because the only alternative you've got is to raise up the action really, and live with it, and hope it goes away actually with the action being raised. So you know that we're in the business here for, you know, we want the action that we want, and we want to make the neck comply with that, and so that's what this leveling is about. And it's, you know, it is a fine tuning. It's not to say this guitar, you know, generally speaking, isn't very good, because it is. We're fine tuning it, and what we're turning up, as you saw just then, is we're turning up something that happens on many guitars. We're turning up an unusually low fret in sequence, and that has a consequence in that it makes the played notes of the 12th and 13th fret sound terrible, particularly on these low strings, but on the bends it's choking out on any high E bends that originate on the 12th fret, and that is the downside of it. And there are, you know, there's no other way around it if you want to play it and get, you know, the bends to be there without choking out. If it turns out that the fret itself is ultimately so low relative to the others that we just don't want to take any more metal, you know, to retrieve that one bent note, then we just have to compromise and raise the action. Or, you know, by the time we do that, we'll have done a bit of both. We'll obviously have done some leveling, and we'll also compromise a bit. So if I now try and bend the 12th high E, so it's choking out on there, right, which is the actual 13th fret. So it's the 12th that's low, and it's obstructing on the 13th. So I'm going to do a little bit more leveling on the, concentrating on the frets either side of this 12th really. And when I say sort of concentrating, it means you can see I'm now putting a little bit more kind of downward pressure right over the 12th and 13th, because I want to bring down just the frets a little bit around this 12th and 13th, but it is substantially lower. I've no idea what they've done. Sometimes the problem is you don't know how much lower it's going to be until you do what I'm doing now. And you may be able to, let's see if you can see. If you can see. Look, 12th fret, almost nothing. It's barely touched. In fact, right there where it's choking out, it isn't touched. So I'm having to take metal off the 13th and the 11th, well, and 10th and the 9th on either side, and then we've still got low spots up there really. But it's that one, that's the 12th fret that's causing the issue, as you can see. Now the funny thing is when you get used to doing this, what you find out is that the leveling beam only tells you what you suspected. So when I played it, I was playing up here going, something wrong there, and that's because I'm playing those notes on the 12th fret, which is in the ditch. Nearly. See, now there, that was totally choked out a minute ago. Got it? That's what this is good for. So now with that leveling, I'll do a tiny bit more, but basically we have retrieved the bend on the high E as it comes across into what I call the G track, and we've retrieved that without having to sacrifice the playing action, and that I know now will be fine. Now as we come across into the D track, from here we get a different sort of effect. We get a sort of Zing sound. And that's what I call fret slap, and that is slightly different, or its cause is slightly different from what we were worried about there. And in the first three strings I was more worried about individual high or low frets, and we did find one there on 12, and we know that's going to carry all the way across. So here I'm looking at for fret slap, and that tends to be caused, it's not caused by individual high and low frets, although the 12th one is still definitely low. So part of that, the worst part of that sound is caused by that one fret, which we're already addressing. But the other kind of slap rattle that goes along with all the notes played up there, that's because the highs and lows of this neck are taking away the extra little bit of space the strings need to vibrate or to spin without hitting the frets. And amazingly, it's my experience that this tool, not only can it sort out the individual high frets, but with a sort of only a change of mindset as you come across the radius, you can also sort out what I call this fret slap. And what I do for that now is I change my mindset, and I'm not, at this point I'm not trying to lower any one fret or tackle any single fret. What I really want now is this thing to keep its shape, and I want it with a little bit of backwards and forwardsing and a little bit of side to siding as well. What I want to do is, if you think about it this way, is I'm trying to gently impose the curve of this rod banana onto the fretboard that's underneath, which effectively is imperfect by comparison. So the fretboard is a kind of curve, but if you look closer at it, it's a curve that's made up of a series of hills and valleys. And whereas the truss rod that we've taken a sort of sample of this curve with the truss rod, not bad. With the truss rod, the curve is actually more perfect, or more perfecter than the actual neck. So I'm I describe it that I'm imposing the perfect curve onto the imperfect curve, and what I really want to have happen is it just helps to tame the hills and bring them down. But now instead of thinking about bringing a high fret down to the low frets, I'm thinking more about taming 2 or 3 high frets and just taking the sort of peak off that hill and trying to even it out with the surrounding topography or terrain. So again, all of this has kind of come from 8 years of experience of doing this. Now I think that's going to leave us with the D track pretty clear. It's good, and there's a tiny bit of ziz at the bottom end there, so I'm just going to focus in inverted commas on that end a little bit more. So I'm using the same calibration, and I'm just, when I say focus, I'm just putting a little bit more emphasis equals slight downward pressure on that area, and that's all. Now this obviously accommodates for the fact that whilst this U-channel truss rod is pretty stiff, it can flex and bend a little bit, and so sometimes when I'm putting the inverted commas focus or emphasis on a certain spot, it's probably true that I'm also bending it a little bit, tiny bit at the same time. But this thing isn't absolutely robot-like. It's a combination of feel and logic. There's a bit of both in there, and quite a bit of it is sort of tacit knowledge that you kind of pick up from doing over the years. And you know, it's easy. You can make this tool in 5 minutes and you can use it on a guitar in 5 minutes flat, but it's taken me 8 years to develop the confidence with it, and to be able to read the neck as a result of using this. So its true value is in what it tells you about the neck, what it confirms to you about the neck, so you sort of learn that your kind of diagnoses about how the guitar was playing turn out to be correct. So for example, as I'm coming across here, I can see right now that the 12th fret on this side of the fingerboard is just as low, so it's still going to be causing a problem. Irrespective of all the other highs and lows, we've still definitely got a single fret issue with the 12th, which we knew from playing it beforehand and which the banana has confirmed. That's improved quite a lot, so I'm going to do a tiny bit more on this, and again the whole issue about how much do you do of this changes. Sorry, it's a judgment call. There's no single answer to it, and you can only really develop the feel for it over time. And of course, that's one reason why you don't start doing this with your favourite, beautiful Case Queen Fender Strat custom shop or whatever. You've got to build up your chops, I suppose, over time on guitars that don't really matter too much. And it's not that you'll mess it up first time, because there's absolutely no guarantee or no real reason what to think you will. That 12th is still a bit hairy. Yeah, there's no absolute reason why you should. The reason I say do it on something that you don't care too much about or isn't too precious is that if you're going to learn something, you're far better off taking away the pressure of on yourself. Don't put yourself under unnecessary pressure by starting out either with your favourite list guitar or maybe doing a special guitar belonging to a friend who's asked you to do a setup. That's unnecessary pressure, and you won't learn. You'll just be panicking the whole time. So you've got to also be able to look at it and have a judgment and go, or know in your mind that this will polish out now and recrown into a nice finished thing. Okay, I'm going to go with that. Now that's not compromise, that's a sort of reality check. I know that's about as good as it's going to be. And if after crowning and polishing, sanding and polishing out, if there's any kind of fret slap in it that I'm not happy living with, then a tiny adjustment on the action will make the difference. But I sort of leave it, I get as far as I'm confident I can get with the leveling, and that's judging how much I've taken, what's left and so on. And then knowing to stop and then allow the final adjustment, if it has to be, will be in the realm of compromise with a minuscule action lift. And of course it is really minuscule. That's the great thing about this. I'm kind of retaining this neck at a start point, which is a very low action, but you know, we can always kind of give up on the task, if you like, and compromise at that point and go, no, we're going to go with the tiny raise of the action. And I keep seeing people talking about, I keep hearing them talking about truss rod adjustments as if they were meant for, they give the impression that the truss rod is the place where you adjust your action. Wow, that's amazing comparatively compared to what it was. That's brilliant. This is going to be a blindingly fast and light guitar. So I'm done with the leveling. A bit of chit chat and so on. It's done. Yeah. So the thing I was complaining about is I keep seeing people in magazines and reviews and stuff where they talk about a particular guitar and they go and say what you do is you either you raise your or you crank the truss rod and get some action increase or whatever. And it's a bit of an annoying point for me, because the truss rod, I recommend that you don't think of your truss rod as a place to go to change the playing action on your guitar. Now, having said that, it's kind of, oh, actually they drop off, don't they? Yes, there we go. That's that easy, isn't it? Yes. Having said that, it's obvious that when you make a truss rod adjustment and change the shape of your neck, that will have sometimes quite a profound impact on the playing action of your guitar. So you will definitely feel it. But I think a lot of problems come for people when they approach it as a primary place to address your playing action. And well, like I say, well, it's not technically 100% wrong, because adjusting your neck relief, giving it more curvature, will definitely change how tall the action feels when you're playing, and it can be a major change. I think it leads you into other problems. So I recommend that if you're kind of thinking about it, I recommend that you think of it, think of the change in action when you make adjustments of your truss rod. The change of action, think of it as a secondary effect, a consequence. It's not a primary one. So I would suggest that you keep in your mind that your truss rod exists for you to counter the strings pull on the neck. So the string pulling on the neck tends to cause it to curve. And that's, some necks it won't, some necks will be stronger than the pull of the strings and so on. But generally speaking, the truss rod is a device for you to control and manage the curvature. Now obviously, sometimes you can put a set of strings on and the relief is exactly kind of right for your playing, and so you don't need to make an adjustment. Sometimes, however, either the neck is quite bendy, and you put a set of strings on, tighten it all up, and before you know it, let's say you've got, hang on, I'm just doing a tweak here, you've got too much relief in your neck, which you don't want, and it creates a really tall action down here. And remember, that isn't because you went looking to set a tall action, it's just how it turned out. So the neck, the truss rod adjuster, is there for you to counter the pull of the strings. So you can, if the strings pull it and pull the neck into a curve, the truss rod allows you to flatten it out again. If there isn't enough curve in your neck, then the truss rod allows you to it allows you to give you some more curve, or if there's too much, it allows you to flatten the neck out. So both ways you can go with it. So that's why it's there. And so the question is, then follows that, is, well, what given that any gauge of strings and all necks are different, stronger, weaker, more flexible, and so on, what you can see that the different guitars, the pull of one set of strings on one guitar will create more curve in the neck than on another, and so on and so forth. So given you've got a particular guitar like this one, you've got a set of strings with a certain gauge, and then you'll only find out what it does to the neck when you put the strings on. And then once you put them on, let's say you think it's got too much relief. Now, the question is, people always say, is how do you know it's got what is too much relief? And I would suggest that when you have the strings on, done up to proper tension, tune, you hold the lower E string down against the last fret, and at the same time against the high fret, and if you can, touch down on the low E string with your thumb at the midpoint, which is about the 8th or 9th fret, depending where you're counting it, and you can gauge first and foremost whether there's any space under that string. Does it press down? Do you hear a little click? Do you see a little space before you press it down, and so on? And the advice I always give is, my start point, I would advise you, is a tiny bit more than none. Right? So if you hold this string down on both those frets, touch in the middle, if it goes down, if you can see it move and there's a click, you've got some. How do you know if it's too much? Well, if you have feeler gauges, you could put a capo on this end here, hold this end with your hand, and then check the space with a feeler gauge. And if you wanted to be precise, you could set about 0.2 of a millimeter, or 0.1, between 0.1 and 0.2 is a fairly good starting point. So that's the important thing. If you have not enough, you'll hold these two down, touch in the middle, and you'll be able to see already, and you'll hear there's no click, the string will already be touching. That is either dead flat, which you don't want, or it's possibly even backbowed, which you really don't want. If it's backbowed, the notes in the first half of the neck will struggle to play because you've got a hump of the neck in the following afterwards. If it's dead flat, you'll have to end up with a slightly higher action down here if it's dead flat here. So you're playing off between the amount of relief, no relief at all, you've got to go a little bit higher here. Some relief, you can come down a little bit lower. So it's kind of down to which feel you prefer. But you've always got to remember that the strings have to have some room to move. And so if you again, the quick assessment of how much relief there is in the neck will become second nature if you get used to just doing it. Even if you're not going to make an adjustment, just practice doing it, capo on there, or hold it down with your finger and tap down on the 8th or 9th, whichever it is, 8th fret, tap the string down, and you'll start to get it, and maybe get a feeler gauge and start to measure, have a guess on different guitars, and then check your guess against the feeler gauge, and soon you'll be able to guess none. You'll be able to guess a whiff of, if it's so close it's almost touching, but you can hear a little click and you can see a tiny bit of movement, then maybe you've got 0.05 of a mil. You'll soon be able to estimate 0.2, and anything above 0.2 you don't really want, because what all that will mean is, yes, you'll probably get away without too much buzz, but you'll feel much taller here. So a tiny bit too much relief here turns into a feeling of a much bigger, taller action than you really want. So whilst action is normally primarily set by the nut and the bridge, remember the adjustments to the curvature of your neck has a secondary impact on action, and it can be quite a profound one, but it's secondary in that I don't encourage you to go there. If your action's too high, first of all, you will need some relief, so set that, and then if it's too high, then you bring it down with these. Then you'll probably run into uneven frets, which you have to assess whether you can level them away with a technique, either the conventional technique for fret leveling or one such as this. So now, having done that and explained some things, probably bored you there who've watched any of these before, I'm going to now recrown these frets. And I think what's good about the recrowning process is that you're going from you're taking the fret that currently has a bit of a flat spot on it, and you're going to just use this file, concave file, to just take away the sharp edges of that flat spot. And I can see where that was being lowered before. We're going to take away those sharp edges, and we're sort of reshaping the fret into a more of an arch shape. But in doing so, make sure I don't remove the black marker pen. So I'm looking to get a nice fine leave behind, a very fine strip of marker pen, and doing that tells me I've reshaped the fret, but I haven't lowered it at all, which is exactly what I need, because I don't want to lower it, since I've gone and spent a lot of time getting these frets relatively level to each other in the strung up playing condition or playing configuration. So it's very important at this stage to be able to track that you're not grinding down the top of the fret any. And this tool has always been a very good one. I've probably used it all of these 8 years I've been doing this, most of the 8 years. You can do it with a three-sided file, which seemed to be quite hard to find, although I think I found one in the Guitars and Woods guy in Portugal. I don't know his name, but he's a good luthier supplies, and it's a three-sided file. You can see it's only the blade. It's only about 3 inches long, and it's got one soft, rounded off edge, so you can use it for reshaping the fret. It's very accurate because you can get even a thinner line than you can with this one, but it's more time consuming. So because I do this every day, all day, well, not all day, but I do this every day practically, several times a week at least, then it's it makes sense spending that kind of money. But for many people, 140 quid or whatever this price is for this one is too much in one go. And if you're only doing it for 1 or 2 guitars, and it doesn't make a lot of financial sense. But if you try to work this out, now this one I'm hardly even touching that one, because I know that we aren't really even touching that with the leveling process. So I don't want to try and do anything to that fret. There's nothing has filed it, so there's no rounding off needed. It's already too low, but we've brought everything around it down enough that it's now playable. Yes, so yeah, expensive, but if you worked it out over the 8 years I've been using it, it's peanuts. Okay, so at this stage, the use of the crowning or the recrowning tool like this it gives me a good idea about how much metal was taken in the leveling process. It's always a good sort of second check. Sometimes you can feel like you think you've taken loads, and you can scare yourself sometimes. But as soon as you come over with the crowning file, it'll show you fairly quickly that you haven't taken much. But of course you have to have multiple goes at doing this on different guitars to have anything to compare against. But when you have a few under your belt, you'll start to recognize ones where you suddenly stop and you have to do quite a bit of filing to round them off. Well, that's because you'll have taken more metal in the leveling process. Quick ones like that show me how little metal I took for the leveling that we got. Right, so with all of that chatty-watty, I'm going to now do the next part of this, which is to mask all of this off, sand and polish it out. Then I'll clean it all up, and then we'll come back. I'll come back on camera afterwards when it's time to put strings on. Because frankly, Scarlett, that's the most of the hard work done, which is preparing the nut, which I did mostly offline, but I've got a tiny bit more to do now just to tailor it to fit in here, and I'll just do a little bit more off camera because I've done it already off camera. Yeah, so I'll come back and that will be done. It might seem like a quick job, but quite a bit of time is spent on that off camera, and then we'll be back to yeah, put the strings on and stretch them out and intonate, and then hear it, I think. So see you in a little bit. Right, we're back. Dust everywhere. You just cannot get these things dust free. Anyway, frets sanded, recrown sanded, polished out, and including given a going over with good old fashioned what's that stuff called? Autosol and a thingy Dremel disc, buffing disc. So I'm just taking a bit of the buffing cream off the outside of those things, and I've also put some oiled the frets as well, or the oiled the fingerboard I should say. So now we're ready to put on the strings, and I'm going to use the usual sort of close-up-y bit to show how I put them on. Now especially with an adjustable nut, so you want to put on the D and the G first with an adjustable nut, and that's really only to hold the string in place. No, hold the nut in place, sorry. So what you should really do, which I just didn't, is line up all your posts so you've got the hole pointing through, so you're not fiddling around too much. Righty-ho, there we go. So this kind of the attachment at the other end is difficult to keep a string firmly in place, so chances are it's always going to want to come off. So I pull it back, wind it on, and the idea is to keep hold of the string. Now it's probably going to come out the other end. Keep hold of the string, wind it on over the loose springy string, and as it comes up, keep it under tension, and as the string comes round, hoik up the loose one and send the held one underneath, and then drop it into the slot on there. Check it down at this end, make sure it's still attached, which it all is. Okay, and then give it a little pull. So that's the D, and we'll do the G next, and then once we've done those we can do any order the rest. But that just now holds this piece, because it is, the top part is loose, the bottom part is lightly glued on, but the top part can always come undone or come out, so that's no problem. And if it does, you just have to put it back in the right way around. There's a taller face, is the front facing bit, so we go all the way up to here, pull back one fret, hold it there now because we can't access it the same way, turn the thing, come on, and over the top, pull up the loose one, and now we've got to re-anchor the string down at this end because it's come out again. Now put it under tension and send this one underneath this time. That's probably put a little bit more on than I would normally aim for, but that's okay, you know. It's not easy to do with this kind of trapeze thing at the end. Thing being the string anchor, the kind of very good looking, stylish thing, but it makes keeping the string in place very difficult, or next to impossible actually. It's probably some clever little trick that I don't know about, but I guess when I take this thing back, I could either, instead of pulling it back a fret's worth, I could do this instead, which is lift it up a certain amount, but I don't know how much that certain amount is. Now it is keeping the string taut, and then that goes over there, but that now has to go under there first time round. Pull this up. So I've kept it all anchored at the far end, but as I say, who knows how much string got pulled up at that point. That's sort of about right. So I could probably just do it, guess that much each time. It's annoyingly inaccurate, but if it keeps the string ball from falling out of this trapeze anchor, that's probably just a good thing. So I can't seem to get it through now. Through there, and it's now come out. Hook it up inside there, bring it through taut, hold the string, and then we're going to pull it up. I think enough. Hold it taut, start it going. No, come on. Over. That's probably a bit more than before, but hey, what the heck. Under. Under twice. Under twice and a half. Ah well, it's not easy to guess, as I said. Not a problem with a regular bridge or regular stop bar, because it's held in place. So again, coming down to this one, holding, see I'm having to hold with one hand, hold the thing in at the far end, and then bring this down, and again I've got to just guess its amount. So that wasn't quite as much. It will do. And finally, all right, pull up a bit more this time. See how to gauge it. It's very difficult though. Right, keeping it tense, and we'll go up one. Call it a full pull. Yeah, that'll do. Right, everything's on the posts, or the saddles I should say. Now we'll just chop these bits away. We'll snip off all the excess strings. Make sure there's nothing left to spike the fingers. Because don't we hate getting spiked? Oh yes. Okay, so first thing to do is to zoom out here and look across here. Thank you. We'll lift it up and just give it a little pull to bed the strings on. Make sure it sits in its notches. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is lift up the first fret action a tiny bit, because I dialed it in when I took the thing off, so it's reset. So now we go up, and now we go, whoops, we go up on this end. So tune up. Okay, that's a little bit low still, so I'll just lift this end up a fraction more. Okay, so having got the action back to where I want it, that hasn't changed since before, but we'll double check it. Yes, it has changed. How did that manage to change while I wasn't looking? Because I was doing some What's changed there? Not the relief, so it's this. I've lost my action. Annoying. It's I don't think it has a, no, it hasn't got a locking thing in there. It's a real shame because I should have been able to lock the thing in place once you've set it, because it always gets moved around when you clean things. So what I'm going to now need is my grandfatherly glasses. And tighten this up a bit. Right, that's about right. On this end. I can't see what I'm doing. Right, okay, we'll come back to fine tuning if necessary in a minute. So, first thing to do now is to stretch out the strings, thumb and forefinger, thoroughly, because as you know, tuning stability has nothing to do with your tuners and has everything to do with your nut and the slack in your strings, the unreleased slack in your strings. And those two things, the nut and the slack in the strings, consider them as each being half of the equation for tuning stability. So you've got to get both of those things right. Now see how much tons, absolute miles of slack came out there, a real ton of it. So it means that we've got to keep going until it all bottoms out. So stretch it again, and again and again. There's a lot of slack in these Ernie Ball 10s. It's actually quite interesting. It seems to be more, whoops, that's my thumb catching on there. It seems to be more than the Dario 10s. I could be making that up, but it just seems today. Can't remember having anything detuned quite that much in one grab, but I could be wrong. I could be just imagining it all. So this is the second kind of stretch through, and then tune up again. Okay, third go, and this is where hopefully it stops detuning shortly, or the amount it detunes by decreases now until we're I keep hitting my thumbnail on those screws, until it's we could sort of call it pretty stable. And that's the beauty of this, is if we get the nut right, and for example we've used Tusk here, and we've got it adjustable for the perfect first fret action. We've got Tusk, which is the right material for a friction-free performance, so the strings aren't going to get caught and create friction in the slots. And then we've got the slack all stretched out. then we've got our tuning equation, tuning stability equation sorted. We're close. So it's usually the bass strings that hold the most slack in them, the wound strings, the fatter wound strings. So by the time everything else is stabilized, we might just get a last pull out of these. There we are. Very close. Fast and furious, flat and furious. Now what I'm going to do is, while I'm at it, we have got our first fret height setting grub screw, hex key, and I'm going to put that onto the scratch plate here so that that's available, and Stuart can grab that whenever he needs it, if he needs to make adjustment. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to check the intonation, but also I think while we're at it, let's do it. We'll get the amp going in a minute as well and have a listen to how it sounds. So we'll do the intonation on the tuner, which is the way it's done. And here we go. Sorry, it's not the best view at the moment. I'll look down here again. Right, so the intonation gets done on a matter of distance. So the scale length is supposed to be 628. Oops, that's on the mark, that's good. So when you ping the 12th fret harmonic and tune it to the note, and then fret the 12th, it needs to be the same note. And if it isn't, then the intonation isn't quite right. So if it's it turns out to be flat when we play the 12th fret harmonic, the 12th fret fretted, that's pretty spot on. If it's sharp, then you need to move the saddle back and make the string slightly longer, the playing length of the string. And if it's flat, you need to shorten the playing length of the string by moving the saddle towards the nut a little bit. It's good, it's all spot on. So we've got the we're on that 1.5, just on 1.5. Yeah, we're the intonation is perfect, so they've done that at the factory and done a good job of that. Let's put on Stuart's strap. Oh, I see it's a regular style one. I was thinking of locking tuners for some reason. That's a lorry. Right, on you go. Oh, no, this is right. I'm not going to put Stuart's strap on because it means I'll have to redo it to my bulk. So let's use a larger strap suited to my huge dimensions. There's a big lorry coming from somewhere, Poland, Ukraine. Hey, wow, really? That's amazing. Ukrainian lorry. Okay, so I'm just going to lift that up here so I can sort of be in camera, in camera, should I want to. I'm just going to try and detangle this short wire. hate doing that because I don't like letting go of someone's guitar. So here's some sounds. So we got a very wide-ranging tone. One would say, take off all the reverb. That's very sharp. So we've got R on the lower position. Then we've got, well, let's try the push-pull. Out. So the pull-out gets thicker. So position 2. Middle. Definitely boosts that with that one out. Position 4. Well, whatever that's going on there, it's nice, I like it. So let's just think. Just listening out for the single coil hum. Right then, okay. I like it. Very good guitar. Very good lead guitar. I've got one little thing to do, and that's just to very carefully trim the, sorry about that, trim the slight little overhang off the what's it, the nut. Just a little bit of overhang. So I'm just going to, off camera, I'm just going to tailor that short, and I'll mask off and just do very careful scraping and blading work. But that's it. Oops, sorry. That's it. All done and dusted. Ready to go for tomorrow's band practice. Woohoo! There we have it. Revstar. Revstar. Beautiful. I'll have to polish it with some more cloths when I get home. Take off my greasy fingerprints. But apart from that, in fact, I better take that cloth with it to do just that. Off the chrome. Sir's coming to pick up his automobile. Right, there we go, that's it. I'll see you again for a next one. Take care.